Ahoy everyone, my name is Bobby Shortle and I'm here with Nick Rocco Scalia, and we are the Intrepid Filmographers. Every miniseries we chart a course through the full filmography of an under-discussed genre or journeyman filmmaker. And in this expedition, we do our best to try and be explorers, using our years of film knowledge to help guide us, but always being open to discovering new things about the medium we love so much. We are currently embedded and actually at the end of our journey with the films of Ben Affleck. And today we're practicing our jump shot with his final film, Air, and see if we too can find romance in a corporate shoe deal. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing all right. Last week we had a big dip in the Ben Affleck oeuvre.
That was a hard one for me. I really wanted to like that movie. I was on this tip where Ben Affleck, I thought we were going to rediscover or discover a filmmaker that needed more respect, and then Live by Night happened, and
he has the appropriate amount of respect.
yeah, maybe even too much. Maybe he's even overrated. Yeah.
But, now we're jumping into this film, his final film. This was in 2023, so it only came out last year. Yeah, very recent. After obviously like 7 years, I guess, in between movies. Obviously we had COVID in between in there and some other stuff that happened, right? So he's also
I think Live by Night caused COVID.
It did, yes.
People are saying it started in a lab, but I think it actually started with a print of that movie, just spread its disease through the world.
That's the new conspiracy theory that's going on. It's Live by Night.
Well, when you had COVID, you kind of talked like his character in that movie. When I had COVID, I kind of talked like the character from that movie. So I don't know. I'm not saying, just maybe look into it, RFK.
Oh boy, we're talking about with an Air, which is the story of Nike signing Michael Jordan to the historic Air Jordan shoe deal that everyone knows, right? Michael Jordan coming out of college, Nike not known for basketball at that time, known for like running, track and field, stuff like that. And this was a big push by the sort of basketball department of Nike to try to sign him. And especially one man named Sonny, played by Matt Damon, who kind of falls in love with Michael Jordan's game and who he thinks he is as a player, and really, really pushes really hard to sign him. And it's a story of that and how that sort of put his job and maybe the whole the Nike basketball department at risk, but obviously ended up being, a success. This was developed in the wake of, speaking of COVID, of the Michael Jordan, The Last Dance documentary that came out, which was this, obviously big documentary, multi-part documentary on ESPN about the last season of the Bulls dynasty and how that all came to be and how it all came together and, what was going on behind the scenes, all that kind of stuff. It was a huge cultural moment during COVID. It really, when everyone was trapped in their houses, was one of those things like Tiger King, those things that just grabbed people's attention and kind of slung this topic back into the limelight. And this movie happening is a direct result of that, right? It's trying to draft off of that success into its own thing.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that the screenwriter of this has one credit. It's this movie. Alex Convery is his name. The script made the blacklist. And I would have assumed, because a lot of the other Affleck stuff like Argo was based on previously written material, I thought this would have been a book or like a GQ article or something like that. And no, it was basically based on just the events that happened.
So this movie, like you said, is a blacklist script. If people don't know what the blacklist is, Nick, can you inform them what the blacklist is?
Yeah, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, I've never made it. My screenplays that I've written, for some reason, have never gotten on it.
They've never been in there?
They've been on some kind of list. The blacklist is basically, who compiles? I'm not actually sure. It's like some kind of Hollywood insider group. Every year they compile a list of the 10 best unproduced screenplays that a lot of times, if you go back through, and nothing's popping into my head, but a lot of movies do end up getting made from these unproduced scripts, but they're like the best scripts that have not yet been made into movies. And a lot of times the scripts that make it onto the blacklist are unknown screenwriters. It's a really great way. I know the business doesn't really work exactly like that anymore, where you write stuff on spec and the right people see it, and then you're in the movie business. But for a long time, that's kind of how it was. And this was one of those places where a script ends up on there, and chances are one of the studios is going to bite on it. Although sometimes it ends up being just stuff that's really good, but maybe not commercial. Whereas this, I think, it's so commercial.
It's very commercial, right? So, the blacklist, I will say, like you said, it is what is Hollywood insiders. I don't know how many people it is. I don't know who decides it. Like you said, what are the best unproduced screenplays? Oftentimes when they are eventually made into movies, The results are very hit and miss.
It's a sort of very bad movies all the time.
Yes, very bad movies.
What's the one, Mel Gibson, I think called The Beaver? It was kind of Mel Gibson's
The Beaver,
comeback
the big
movie,
one.
which I've never seen. I think Jodie Foster's in. She might have even directed it.
She did direct it.
So I remember that being a blacklist script. I was just thinking of an example of one, but I don't remember if the movie was any good, but it's an interesting idea. It's about a guy who channels his trauma into a beaver puppet. Some kind of
it seems like exactly the kind of script that end up in this situation, right? Which is like this quirky thing, but like
it's a Golden Globes movie, like Air is a Golden Globes movie.
Exactly. A very famous one from the last couple of years is Don't Worry Darling, which obviously had a lot of other things around it that caused it to be in the news, but that was one of those scripts. In Slim in 2019 was one of those. Manchester by the Sea was one of those, speaking of this series, and Casey Affleck.
Movie. Terrible movie to go see on my birthday that year, but that's what I wanted to do.
Jojo Rabbit was one of these screenplays, which you can obviously see why that would be one of these screenplays, right? The Imitation Game, The Fault in Our Stars, The King's Speech, obviously Oscar-winning. Juno was one of these, right? This is how Diablo Cody got kind of like catapulted into, the big time, right? Her script ended up on the blacklist.
Didn't actually know that, and I love Diablo Cody, and we've talked about her on the show a lot before.
Yeah.
Guess I didn't love her as much as I thought I did.
So, but again, it's a very hit and miss thing, like it can end up being great. It can end up being bad, but it often is a way to get at least your name out there. A lot of people who write these blacklist screenplays end up, not even that thing doesn't get produced, end up writing other things, end up doing rewrites on things. They get their names into the sort of soup of people you call. Right?
It's a foot in the door, although all the ones you've mentioned are established people who just wrote a good script, and for some reason they just couldn't get anybody to make it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. There's one that's like, there's a couple that are super famous that I'm just like I'm not thinking of. But whatever. I'm just trying to.
Well, anyway, Air was one.
It was,
and you can kind of see why it got the attention that it got.
Yes, absolutely. Very good script. So you say this movie gets made. It's supposed to be a streaming movie. It's supposed to be coming out in prime day and date. The test screenings were really good, so they ended up actually deciding to do a theatrical release, and then end up making a decent amount of money in the year it came out for the kind of movie it is, right? $14 million opening, ends up making in the mid 40s, $50 million domestically, and then goes and this is while it's still actually on streaming at the same time. It's still making some money. So a kind of a little bit of a breakthrough that time. Obviously, the production budget is huge. It's $90 million because it's full of licensed brands and 7,000 songs. And obviously a bunch of huge actors, right, are in this movie. So but especially in this era, and it's only a year ago, but we're already sunsetting at this point. This is probably one of the last ones through the door. This time where streamers were kind of like, no, we don't care how much money it makes in the theater. We'll give you basically a blank check to make your movie, and it's kind of a prestige thing for us. It's like, look what's on our service, right? So obviously Netflix still a little bit does this with, it's with like 2 or 3 directors, which are big time directors. It kind of goes like, just do your thing. Like Fincher is obviously one of these people, right? Fincher has a huge contract with them, can do whatever he wants, and they don't really care. Apple TV was kind of the last place that was doing this, Napoleon, Killers of the Flower Moon, stuff like that. But the financial box office failure of those things has kind of caused that to be a bye-bye. Now, I doubt we're going to see this very much anymore, right? Unless it's already been.
Which is unfortunate, because we've talked a lot about these types of movies, these kind of, I don't want to say mid-budget. I mean, Air's a fairly big budget movie. We're coming in just under 100 million, but they are, they're the type of movie that you don't see so much anymore. Adult-oriented dramas that are about serious-ish things and don't have any sort of superhero or genre stuff really in them, with these kind of, all-star casts. We're not talking about like total A-listers across the board, but it's all recognizable faces, people that have done a lot of television and things like that, and former stars from previous eras that are fun to see on screen again, like Chris Tucker, who's great in this movie.
It has the patina of a mid-budget movie, even though it's a
does,
high budget.
It's just a costly one. Yeah, it's
exactly.
It's a real expensive Gap sweater.
It is, but it does have one of the other staples of modern life that's not superheroes or genre, which is brands. So it is that fits into this other sort of of making movies based on brands, right? And we have a lot of them now. Obviously, I think some of the most famous ones are more straight up comedies, like that awful Jerry Seinfeld Pop-Tarts movie called Unfrosted, that like Flamin' Hot Cheetos movie.
I thought you were talking about Barbie.
No, I'm not talking about Barbie.
Okay, well, it's a movie based on an established brand.
It is based on, but that is like, but I'm talking
Transformers, those type movies.
I'm not even talking about those. I'm talking about. I'm talking about brands like we're talking about a shoe company here. Like we're not talking about like, oh, you've got a character that we make things out of. Now we're making movies based on like, oh, how did Pop-Tarts get made? You know, how did the BlackBerry come about? BlackBerry, a very good movie, but like, you know, this kind of thing where it's like we are not everything can be a pre-written IP that's like, you know, from pre-done fiction material. Now we've got to go like, how else can we get people to watch it? They'll have a brand name on it that they'll come in and watch.
So unlike something like Barbie, you're saying these are movies where the corporation is the hero in some sense.
Not even that, just like Transformers, Barbie, these are characters, right? They're fictional characters. Speaking of Ben Affleck in James Silent Bob Strike Back, what I'm really talking about here is Air is about a corporation and a brand doing something, right? How a brand thing came to be. This is kind of what BlackBerry is about too, right? It's about how did this consumer good become a thing, right? We put brand name, you know, there's a lot of brand names going on that are not fictional characters that already exist, right? That has been something that's going on for ever and ever and ever. And that's one section of things, right? This is a whole other thing, which is like sort of mostly real based on real events, but you know, sometimes tweak like Unfrosted, like that, like the Flamin' Hot Cheetos movie or whatever, which fits into another grouping of things, which kind of bums me out, right? Because like this movie, to put the cards on the table, I think is tantalizingly close to being a great movie. But I think the thing that holds it back is the very thing I'm talking about, which is, I'm sorry, I cannot be emotional about your multi-million-dollar shoe deal. You know, and I cannot, and there's a review put in the dossier, which the person's like, we're supposed to take this like, you know, multi-billion-dollar corporation with a CEO who drives a custom Porsche as the underdog story, you know, like that kind of thing, right? And
so, like, I mean, I see this movie a little. I mean, you're right. You're 100% right, and I did put that review in there because I thought it was a perceptive point. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think what this movie is about, the kind of movie this reminded me of, and the reason why I liked it as much as I did. It's not perfect. It's got some pretty major issues that I think hold it back from being a great movie. But that's not what bothers me. We'll get to my stuff later. But this is the kind of like rebel versus the system in the corporate world kind of movie. Like one of my favorite movies, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but Tucker, the Coppola movie, Tucker, The Man in His Dream. This feels a lot like that. There's another one with the auto industry called Flash of Genius with Greg Kinnear. That's a similar kind of story.
The Winter Viper movie.
Yeah, exactly, which you wouldn't think there's a movie in that, but actually it's a very interesting sort of legal drama about that. So it's about these people within the corporate system who kind of buck the trends and take these risks and become, you know, the sort of heroic figure in a world that we are a little bit sort of skeeved out about these. I'm not the communist that you are, Bobby, but I understand what you're saying, but I don't know. I don't mind. Like, look, I like Air Jordans. And, you know, I think it's pretty cool that they became what they became. And the movie does this thing where, you know, Nike is kind of the rebels and Adidas and Converse are the evil empire. And I sort of like that. You know, it's an interesting way of framing
Nike
this
would
story.
love you to think that, Nick.
Sure, they would.
Nike would love you to think,
I guess I bought it.
I love Nike. They're such a little underdog company. Like, that's what they want you to feel. That's what bothers me about this. The stuff you're talking about, the Tucker, you know, Man in His Dream and type of thing, the insider inside of a machine trying to bust out and
eventually
do
the system crushes those people, right? And this movie is the opposite of that. It's like, no, I'm just going to move up the corporate ladder at night. And certainly that's true. But it does, you know, because the character, I love those kinds of characters, that sort of insider rebel kind of, you know, the big thinker, the ideas guy who steps up the way Sonny Vaccaro does in this movie. I enjoy that story. And I do like the Air Jordans, like I said, but you know, I understand where you're coming from too.
Yeah. I would say this is what you're saying is actually the thing that is the most hard for me to resolve in my head, which is I also like those kind of characters. I also think Matt Damon's performance in this is great. And I like the stuff where he's like, look, I know that this is going to be something special. I know this guy is going to be, you know, something great. And if we don't do it, if we don't jump on this, if we don't put everything into it, we're going to regret it. Right. I like that as an idea. And for the most part, I think the movie pulls it off. There are just these times where you can kind of feel like Nike being like, but now you got to say something a little nice about the corporation. Now you got to say like a little something nice about Phil. Now you got to, like there's a little bit of that in there. And much like we talked about with Argo, right? Which is, I feel like there's Plain Devil's and Argo where the filmmakers are trying to push back against this kind of overarching, like entity, making sure they don't say anything too nasty about the US government, right? Like that whole thing. I feel the same thing here. It's like, they're like, I guarantee you, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are like, we love movies like this. We love, like you said, mid-budget dramas with cool actors, just talking to each other.
Like Aaron Sorkin, David Mamet style monologues, ton of those in this movie. Too many, I would say.
And the only way we can do it is if we do it in this delivery system, right? So I don't begrudge Ben Affleck for making this movie. I think he did a really good job, and again, like I said, I really enjoyed this movie, right? I just think there are those times where they have something and then they've got to put a little bit of a button on it that's like, right, but aren't we so good? Isn't Nike great? So there's that stuff. The other part of me that holds back a little bit is just the standard, like, even though this isn't a biopic, right? Just like the little, like,
yeah, I saw this thing on TV and now I'm inspired and that moves the plot forward.
Ben loves it. Ben, we've seen 2 movies where randomly he's watching something on TV. A character was watching something on TV and he gets an idea for something. But it's also just the like, Charles Barkley, I'm not sure if that guy's going to be any good. Nobody wants to see Charles Barkley on camera. And I'm like, all right, guys, we know he hosts a TV show every day of the NBA season. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, you don't have to get so cute. I don't need the cuteness.
You know who probably hates this movie is Mel Turpin.
Mel Turpin's like, why am I taking strays? I already failed. I already failed to just rub it in.
Fuck you, Ben Affleck. How dare you?
Because some guy in Nike was like, I like Mel Turpin.
What do you like about Mel Turpin?
Yeah, so, this movie starts in the credits. Again, another thing we've kind of picked out about Affleck, right, is it's all archival footage. All the credits are archival footage. It's the thing he loves to do, where he really tries to sort of bring a documentary or an organic, real style to this fictional story he's telling. Right?
I would say this movie could have one of those things like movie posters have. Like if this said from the director of Argo, if that was just like superimposed over the whole movie, you don't need it because it basically is doing that anyway, but it really feels like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like this is kind of an unofficial Argo sequel in some sense.
In some ways it is. It has a lot of the same stuff going on in it, right?
Obviously, a lot of the same rhythm, the same sense of humor.
Yes.
The pacing is not as good, but similar.
Yes. Obviously, much lower stakes where, this is where
no one's dying in this movie. Like this movie has very, very low stakes. I mean, I think that's one of my biggest problems with it is I don't know if there's a story for a feature narrative movie here.
Yes.
Particularly the way it's handled, where it's very low stakes, very low drama, low conflict. I mean, it's multi-million-dollar corporations versus themselves and
exactly.
Let them fight kind of thing. So I think that's one of the things that definitely holds this movie back. And as sympathetic as the Jordan family is portrayed in this movie, it's not enough. It's particularly not. Because Michael is not really in it.
Right. Which I don't mind the choice of not having Michael Jordan as a character because, like, who are you going to get to play Michael Jordan? What kind of performance they have to put on when he's just a guy that's so still omnipresent, especially when this movie
the way it cuts around him is so overly cutesy, and I just can't stand it. It's like a Saturday Night Live sketch.
I know, I get it.
Not in a good way.
Yeah. So, there's stuff like you're saying about trying to make this a narrative feature and really hold the weight of a narrative feature. At the very beginning, one of the first things we get, right, is we get these credits, one of our first needle drops, which we'll talk about those as we go, but in general, I'm not really a fan of the soundtrack. Not the songs. Like, the songs are good, but just a little too obvious, a little too on the nose. Like, you're not digging deep, right, for these tracks.
Well, yeah. Like what Fortunate Son is to 70s war movies, like everything in this is to early 80s, any kind of movies. Yeah.
The only time I was like, the Sister Christian was one of the needle drops at one point. And that one I was like...
that one's taken, guys. You can't use that. That song has been claimed. That was a note that I made when I was watching this movie. I was like, once Boogie Nights happened, like Sister Christian is just off the table.
Yeah.
I did like, there's a couple of Violent Femmes songs in this movie from their first album, you know, the one everybody knows, but then another one from like later in the album. I'm like, okay, a Violent Femmes deep cut is a nice choice here.
I could have done with a little, not even a little, couple more deep cuts, a couple more like, just not like this was the #1 song in the world for however many weeks. Like that's what it felt like a lot with the needle drops. It didn't really bring anything to it for me.
Reminded me a lot of listening to the radio in my parents' car when I was a very little kid. Like those are the songs from like 5-10 years before. It's like, oh yeah, that's a popular song.
Yeah. But one of the first things we see, right, is we see Matt Damon's character, Sonny, at a high school basketball game. He's kind of talking to a player.
Glad handing everybody.
Yeah, you know, basically setting up, this is what he does, right? And we hear it a couple other times throughout the movie. Nike doesn't have a big presence in the basketball world, and he's trying to basically get them started young, right? He's trying to get them Nikes when they're in high school and then make a bunch of bets, and then somebody is going to break out big, and they'll be wearing Nikes already, and they'll stick with us, right? And then all of a sudden we'll go. Right after that, though, he stops in like Las Vegas or whatever and makes a bunch of bets and makes a bunch of money, loses a bunch of money. This is something that's brought up like once or twice, maybe one more time in the movie, right? Something I think is really, it feels like it was supposed to be something more. You know, like this is supposed to be like a big character defect of him, and it was going to put something at risk, you know, as far as the deal was going to go. You could feel like the narrative hooks being, you know, planted.
Absolutely, but it doesn't really work metaphorically. I mean, he is risking careers and risking Nike's money throughout the movie, but it's not like you're just putting it all on red and you know, taking that kind of chance. So
you're trying to sign the 3rd pick in the draft. It's not like you're trying to like, you're being like, this guy is the 50th pick in the draft, but I know he's gonna be the best.
Betting it all on the 0-0. Yeah,
exactly. It's no, this is Michael Jordan. He was already super well regarded coming out of college. So it's not like you're, like you said, like letting it ride on some, you know, hard to hit number or something like that. But we get this, then kind of immediately we get into the Nike offices, and we have our first scene with Chris Tucker, so between Matt Damon and Chris Tucker. And this
I'm sorry, I got to say this. I like Chris Tucker. Friday is a hilarious movie. And I love it very much. Hadn't seen him in a while, and seeing him in this movie, and he looks great. Like he doesn't look bad, but he looks a little doughy and a little old, and it just made me kind of feel doughy and old, and I didn't like that. This is the first time I've seen Chris Tucker in a movie, and I was like, not great.
He's not a tiny, skinny little like 22-year-old anymore.
No, it looks like he could be a grandpa now. And
I don't know if he'd be a grandpa. I think he's in his 40s or late 40s, 50s, early 50s, probably.
Like probably late 50s, right?
You think so?
I think.
You think he's that much older than Damon? Really? I don't know. I actually have no idea.
Better than Damon, but Damon's trying to look old and young in this movie.
Well, we can talk about this now. I'm a big fan of sort of the place that Damon has sort of moved into now in sort of his middle age or later middle age, where he's just like, I'm going to play like kind of normal sort of frumpy dudes now when I'm like the lead in something, you know, and then, or I'll just play like the cool little character part, like in like an Oppenheimer or something like that, where I'm like sort of I'm playing sort of like an old school sort of movie star supporting role in this movie, you know, bringing something to it, which is different than the energy he used to bring when he was younger. Right. And I think that's really cool. I think The Martian was sort of maybe the start of this, you know, kind of era for him. And then it's kind of morphed as he's gotten older, but I think he's great in this, you know, and I think he holds down the center of it really well while still being interesting. And, you know, Damon, when he's really good, has always had that great mix of like, yes, I'm watching Matt Damon. I like Matt Damon. I feel comfortable with Matt Damon, but also being a good enough actor where sometimes you're not just like, every moment you're not like, Matt Damon, right? You're not, you kind of lose yourself in who he is. He's got that great mix, you know, that only certain movie actors have. And I think he brings it here. How'd you feel about his performance in this?
I liked him in this a lot. I thought he was just very charming and likable. Yeah. And like I said, I do like those kind of characters, and I like these kinds of movies in general. And yeah, I like the energy that he brings to it. Like, you know, Matt Damon he was that A-list, like super handsome, you know, blonde-haired, blue-eyed movie star guy for a very long time. And, you know, unlike say a Robert Redford, who kind of did like the older version of that throughout his career. Yeah, I like the risks Matt Damon has taken, and he's not afraid to, you know, there's a moment in this movie where he's wearing like a tight sweater, and you can just kind of see the gut just peeking out all over the place, and like he's fine with that. And I appreciate that. You know,
me too.
You know, the idea, as you said, to be sort of a regular guy, to play a normal person in some sense, which, you know, Sonny Vaccaro was not. Like that guy's probably a super rich person at this point.
Yeah, probably, almost definitely. And I'm sure, well, obviously one of the things in movies you're like, this guy's charming, how much he wants to do this. I bet working with him was a nightmare.
Probably.
Most people were like, I hate this guy.
I'm sure he probably came off as an asshole, but as played by Matt Damon, I sort of, I want to follow him.
Absolutely. But this scene with Chris Tucker, and my thing about Chris Tucker in this movie, I think for me, it's a very peaks and valleys type of performance. I think like when he's schmoozing, when he's just kind of like talking to somebody and he's supposed to be schmoozing.
Love that.
I'm in it. Like, I'm like, yeah. I'm laughing. I would love this guy. Like, if a guy was talking to me, he'd be charming the pants off me too.
But like serious corporate Chris Tucker?
No, like that conversation where he calls Matt Damon. It's like, I think he's gonna go with Adidas, man. I'm sorry. I really believed in you. I'm like, I'm not buying it as much now, you know. But Chris Tucker, I mean, it's great to see him in a movie. Like you said, I sometimes it's good to have people show up and you're like, oh, this guy's in this movie. Great. I love that.
Of those, we've talked about it a lot. Those one scene wonders that I love so much. Marlon Wayans shows up in this movie for a little bit, and he's great.
I think he's great in that one scene. I think he really brings it in that one scene in a fun way.
Funny though, like there's a couple of those scenes are here, and a lot of those were put in at Michael Jordan's request. Like he wasn't involved with the production, but he made some suggestions, which I think were more like demands on the producer of this, Ben Affleck. And so that character who wasn't really instrumental to the story in real life, Michael Jordan's like, no, you got to get this guy in there. It's an interesting story, and I guess he really did have a partially written letter by Martin Luther King. And it's an interesting little monologue. Doesn't really do much for the movie overall. No, but it's fun to see Marlon Wayans in there, and he delivers it really well. So, all right, Michael Jordan.
Yeah, the scene.
Who am I to argue with Mike?
The scene definitely feels like it got added, even if you don't know that, because you're like, he goes somewhere else randomly to talk to this guy. The guy really gives him no information that Chris Tucker didn't give him, you know, and then, goes from there or what have you. But good to see Marlon Wayans in it for sure.
And man, I didn't realize what a fan I was of him, but Chris Messina, I said he was having a really good time and Live by Night. Like, he was one of the highlights of Live by Night. Yes. And there weren't many, but man, is he fun in this movie.
He's great in this. I was like, man, I don't know what kind of relationship Ben Affleck and Chris Messina have, but obviously he loves him too. Because he brings him in every movie that he's in.
Yeah, I'll bet there was alcohol involved.
I bet so too. But he's great in this. And it's this is the perfect role for Chris Messina. The perfect role.
Better than Dion Bartolo. For sure. Yeah,
for sure. Which is to be, that sort of like charming in an abrasive way, with like a hot temper. It's perfect. He nails it. This guy.
I love the way he modulates too. Like he'll be just like screaming obscenities into the phone, and then Ben Affleck, Damon's character says he's out of shape. I'm not out of shape.
Yeah, but they have good interplay, right? I love the way that Damon kind of winds him up. He knows like, I'm gonna say something now that's gonna send him even farther out. See him Monday. Yeah, see him Monday and hangs up the phone or whatever, and just like giggling about it. I really like that quite a bit. But before we get that, the first Tucker scene is really about setting the stage, right? We talked about with Nike, right? Like, we only have one player. It's Moses Malone. He's really good. We need more players. Nobody wants to sign here. Everybody likes Adidas. That's really like where we're at this point. Like, because I think part of it, the mission of the movie, and I don't my feeling is it doesn't really succeed at this, is to make you feel like, oh, right. Let's re-level set our heads. Like Nike it wasn't Nike then. It's like it is now. It was something else, right? Because you go in this movie, you're kind of like, of course, Nike and basketball. That's like, that those two things just go together, right? And at this point, that wasn't the truth, right?
Well, this really wants to be a sports movie. It
does.
It's about sports footwear, but it is, it kind of has the feel of a sports movie, this underdog sort of, ragtag sports movie where this bunch of guys get together and they, they're all a bunch of misfits, but they put it together and they win the big game kind of thing. That's what this movie is. It's just that sort of in the corporate world. So Nike, this multi-million-dollar corporation who, I guess it sort of works that they have the running division. They run the world when it comes to running shoes, but basketball is kind of like an afterthought. And like you said, they have like one good player and they're trying to find some others like coming up in the draft, and they know they don't have enough money to get like, the number one pick. So what are we going to do? And again, it's set up, I think, very well because, that this is before our time, right? Like, when I was old enough to know what a Nike sneaker was, I was like, oh, that's the coolest shit in the world. And Michael Jordan wears those.
Because of Michael Jordan.
Yeah, exactly. So this is how that happened. This is the generation before us would have been in a world where like, they mentioned Run DMC and My Adidas, which is great. Yeah. And so, that's like, I missed out on that. Like Run DMC was a legacy act by the time I started listening to it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And after we get our first we continue, I think the script does a really good job though of setting up the stakes of the world and sort of the situation in entertaining ways, right?
The corporate stuff in this movie is so fun and so funny and so well done. I mean, I get tired of it after a while. I think this movie does not get better as it goes on. But like the first 45 minutes to an hour of this, these, boardroom scenes and these like corporate meeting scenes, which that can be the driest stuff in the world. But like when you've got Matt Damon and Jason Bateman's really, really fun in this movie.
He is really fun in this.
They're having a serious conversation while Bateman's in a bathroom stall with his pants around his ankles. It's like, the way it's staged, the back and forth between the two of them, and Matthew Marr comes into this later.
Our man.
Great to see him again. Yeah, so nice that no hate crimes, no molesting. He's a really cool guy in this movie. He is. Good for him. He deserved that from Ben Affleck, who clearly likes him a lot.
Yeah,
as we've talked about. But yeah, like I've never really, like, I don't know about you, I've never really worked in the corporate world. So
no, me neither. Not really.
I can't vouch for the veracity of this, but that sort of locker room good old boy kind of, which people hate, right? That's I understand where some people would look at this movie and be like, I want nothing to do with 2 hours of that. But
right.
I do find that stuff kind of interesting, and not in an office space kind of way, but like these are people who are really good at their jobs and really give a shit and are creative and are interesting, but are flawed, and just kind of the way they bounce off of each other is really, really interesting in those scenes, I think.
Yeah, and like it's something we talked about before. It's sometimes, I think when it's at its best, it's a process movie, right? It's a movie about figuring stuff out, solving little problems and puzzles, and just that whole thing. Like you said, good people are good at their jobs, trying to do good at their jobs. So I like that's when I think the movie is cooking. And I do agree with you. I think what basically, we can go through the movie chronologically as we go, but I think the movie is about 25 minutes too long. Agreed. I think we get to that scene where, basically they've decided they're going to pitch to Jordan. Phil Knight's on board. The CEO's on board. You're like, okay, the meeting's tomorrow. I'm like, okay. And I was like, okay, are we almost done with the movie? And then because I didn't remember. I was like, I feel like it was longer than this. I paused it. We're at an hour, right? And I'm like, it's an hour and 54 minutes. Like, this basically should have been meeting with Michael. We get the phone call. It's over. Like, there's like 20 minutes of just like, what are we doing? Like, I don't even know what we're doing anymore. It's a lot of patting itself on the back. Yeah, it's very, it's the worst version of the Return of the King ending. Yeah, where it's like, let's just end this and end this and end this and end this. And like, again, because that story is not so compelling, you don't need that, right? Like, we don't need epilogue after epilogue after epilogue. And this is one of the, like, I was very much enjoying this movie, and like halfway through it, I'm like, I want to recommend this to people. Yeah. There's dialogue in this movie that I wanted to just write down and, put up on my wall in my office kind of thing, and by the time it was over, I was like, the first half of this movie is very good. The rest of it, I guess you have to kind of see it through, but it definitely lost me at some point toward the end. Yeah. But the next scene after the Chris Tucker scene is we get the draft pick scene, right? And I think, again, this is a really clever, fun way to convey this information they need to convey, right? That what you're saying, like, we don't have enough money. These first 3 draft picks are off the board. Don't even think about them. Don't even look at them. Let's start saying names. It's kind of like that scene in Moneyball, right? Where they're trying to figure out how they're going to sign the guy, which a process movie about sports.
With that sort of wry sense of humor. I really like that stuff. I do. Yeah. This movie is like kind of full of dad jokes, and I enjoy dad jokes. This is it's a dad joke movie.
It's a dad ass movie too. This is like the movie where you can imagine, if this came out when like we were kids, your dad would be like, Air. Great movie.
I got to tell you, like, that first hour, I was thinking about like who I'm going to recommend this to, and my dad was like #1 on the list, and I still will. He'll probably watch the first half of it and like it, and probably shut it off about halfway through, which is fine.
But this week we also get the information about Damon Wood, right? Which is that he's one of these guys who's like, I'm not a corporate boardroom guy. I don't want to hear like you're just like your things you say to get through the meeting and come away with your manager being like, oh, George was really involved today, so kind of goes after that guy when he says he likes, what the fuck is that guy's name?
Melvin Turpin.
Mel Turpin. And really goes after him about it,
Well, I don't know. Like, one of the things that this movie kind of needs to do that it doesn't is, like, Sonny seems to have this very deep connection to the game of basketball.
Yes.
And I think we get it a little bit later on. Like, he mentions like starting up a tournament, and then so for Nike, he started up these, like, I think it's high school tournament or maybe college tournament where
it was
like,
high school. It was high school.
High school. So really good high school players, they get together, they wear Nikes, they compete to see who's the best. And then every shoe company, the competitors, they all ended up having their own after that.
Yeah.
Sort of inspired by him. And so maybe it's just that, right? Like maybe basketball is like where he's made his mark. So that's why he kind of feels this way about it. But he also just seems to have this genuine appreciation for like the artistry of the game.
Yeah.
There's a great scene where they're looking at tape of Michael Jordan, him and Bateman's character a little bit later on, where you do kind of see that little glimmer in his eye. And I think Matt Damon's like really at his best there. It's a great, great scene. One of those things that if you're an actor, if you're like a middle-aged male actor looking for a scene to do with somebody, like that's your scene, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there is, I kind of want a little bit more of that from this character, because otherwise he's just, corporate guy that's trying to just stand out amongst his fellow office mates or whatever.
Yeah. And I want to say Bateman in this movie is doing something very interesting with like his shtick, his persona. He has still got that, sort of quick-witted.
He's very sarcastic, but
sarcasm.
I think he's very sympathetic in this movie also.
Yeah, but there's like this sadness behind it that he doesn't usually
getting
convey.
Older. He's estranged from his wife and sees his daughter. The monologue late in the movie where he talks about his daughter and how he brings her a pair of Nike shoes every time he sees her. I was almost in tears.
Yeah.
And from this movie and from Jason Bateman, I was not expecting that. That's, that was the best thing in the second half of the movie for sure for me.
Yeah. And, the beginning of that monologue, I wasn't on board. I was like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, same here.
And then when it probably finished, the same thing. I was just like, okay, yes. Like, great. Like, really wasn't expecting to get this sort of character depth from this guy. And I think the stakes work the best when it's dealing in that arena, right? Which is, listen, man, like when he says that thing to me, he goes like, I don't think you have the appropriate amount of respect for the risk you're taking with all of us.
Right.
Right. And I think that, like you're talking about in these movies, usually that part is not brought into the equation, right? You're meant to just sympathize with the guy who's fighting the system, and you're like, yes, fight the system, get with the thing. But you're not brought into this fact of this guy being like, look, man, like I have this job. It's the one thing that connects me to my daughter. If I lose this job, I don't know what I'm going to do. And when he says like, you got to take risks. And he goes like, spoken like a man who doesn't have a
7-year-old for 4 hours on a Sunday, something like that. Yeah. Oh,
which is just great. Great line, great performance by Bateman. That mixing, not leaving behind his shtick, but bringing in the sadness, this sort of nebbishness to it, almost to the point where he's almost saying it like he's defeated, right? He's not even saying it to get somebody's goat. He's just like, this is the only weapon I have left as corporate middle manager to like,
this is a great,
make my mistake.
It's a great dad movie. It's a great middle-aged movie, right?
Yeah.
There's one of my favorite bits is like Matthew Marr's character early on in the movie. They see him. We don't even know it's him, and he's bald and middle-aged, and he's outside riding a skateboard, and they're like, why is that guy riding a skateboard to work? Oh, I don't know, maybe he's having a midlife crisis. And then later on that pays off when they see the skateboard in his office, and they're like, so what's with the skateboard? He's like, I'm having a midlife crisis. And like there's so much in this movie that is, I hate to say it, but like I'm at this stage in my life too, and like some of the disappointments and just sort of the things that you are concerned about and your perception of yourself and everything. And again, this is a movie made by people of that age, that generation. Ben Affleck's been through some shit at this time, by now. And I do like, if there is some sort of emotional core to this movie, because, it's not Michael Jordan, right? We know Michael Jordan's going to be fine.
Right.
And there's no, like, we want to be, because we love Michael Jordan, right? We want to be sympathetic to him and his family, but it's like, no matter who they go with, they're going to be pretty well taken care of. But there is this sense that, this is kind of a last ditch thing for these guys. And, the energy that they put into it. And again, Matthew Marr's character, we'll have to talk about a lot. This guy who's just obsessed with basketball shoes, where this is his art form, like he wants to express himself through this medium that is not really an artistic medium at all. Like, I'm very sympathetic to that, I think.
Yeah. It's like you said, it's this idea of, I'm fascinated by people who are super specifically good at something that you don't really think about as a thing people do, right? You don't really think about like there's a guy who designs the shoes,
the sole, right? Like who the line of the sole. He has like a real heartfelt monologue about that. I really like that.
Yeah, like you see how it's like waves, almost like the shoe has always existed, and they're
like, yeah. So how do we market that?
Yeah. How long until you can have the mock-up done? It's just they love the way it looks, but they don't understand they're not really into like the art behind it. But it's cool that there's a person who has that thing, you know, and. One of the things I do like about these type of stories and like this, it's, it's a Moneyball thing too. You can fall into that character too, is like, to say like finding out jobs that you didn't know were jobs and people who are super good at them, even though you're like, how did you get from wherever you started to, I'm the guy who designs the shoes for Nike? What was the path like to there? I think is super fascinating. Right. And I think, like you said, the movie can't hang on Michael Jordan because we know Michael Jordan's going to be fine. And also it's a true story. So we already know Michael Jordan's going to sign with them. But, that's one of the problem with these kind of stories, right? It's a famous thing, There's not many things more famous than the Air Jordan line from Nike, right? So how do you inject, some of this drama, some of these stakes into it? They try their best with some of these character stuff, like the Bateman stuff, right? Like whatever's going on with Sonny. But that's why I feel like we needed more that wasn't just about getting the shoe deal for these characters, because we know they're going to get the shoe deal. So, those stakes, it's more about finding out how they do it than if they're going to do it, right? And so some of that stuff is super interesting, like the shoe guy. Like, I don't know if Sonny really was watching that Arthur Ashe commercial, right? We talked about this something on TV. And this one, Sonny's watching two TVs. He's got Michael Jordan on one TV. He's got Arthur Ashe on the other TV talking about his racket. We're going to get both of them done at one time. Here, you can't get
very surprised that there was a time in American history when you could advertise a tennis racket on TV and people would be like, oh, Arthur Ashe plays with that one. I could get the same racket as Arthur Ashe. Like, did people watch tennis back then?
Oh, yeah. Tennis was super popular for a long time. Like, even when we were kids, tennis was still pretty popular. Like the Pete Sampras, Andre Agassi times.
Okay.
Like, those were still pulling in ratings and stuff like that, But back, remember, there used to be like 4 channels, Nick.
I say this is like the world's biggest golf fan, so...
But there was 4 channels, Nick. You only then a lot of choices. If tennis was on, you were watching
tennis is one of them. Yep.
Yeah. You're if you were a dad of that era and you were going to watch sports on a day, if tennis was the sport that was on,
and it wasn't Sunday. Sure.
Yeah. That's what you were watching. You were watching the tennis match, right? So we're going to watch Arthur Ashe or, John McEnroe or whatever, play tennis.
I love McEnroe.
So I like that. This one bothered me less than the Argo, I'm watching Planet of the Apes with my son thing, right?
Well, Arthur Ashe is a little more inspiring than what is it, Beyond the Planet of the Apes or whatever. Yeah.
Also, he's watching just like a sports marketing thing.
It's his industry.
Yeah, sure. Which makes sense to me, right? While he's watching basketball, we get the whole like breakdown of the shot, right? You talked about that really good scene where he's like he's looking at back and forth at the thing, and you don't know in that moment when he's first looking at it why he's looking at it like that, right? But that's what drives him to go talk to Bateman and be like, "This is who I want."
What is the line? There's a great line. I should have just written down. I could have done that through the whole movie, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to just quote from it. But Bateman's character, when he's about halfway through that monologue, he says something like, "So, is your plane on final descent, or are you just circling?"
Yeah, it's a good line.
Like, you have lost your mind. How far along are you? I love that.
Yeah, and also one of those lines that only Jason Bateman can pull off.
Absolutely.
That one of those things.
That's what I love about him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love him breaking down the shot. And I love the fact that at first you're kind of like Bateman. You're like, yeah, I get what you're saying, but like, what's the big deal? And it's not till he's like, but look how relaxed he is. Like, he knows the shot's coming. It's the biggest shot he's ever going to take to that point. He knows the whole world's watching. And he's just loose and like happy. Like, he wants the ball. I was like, that's a cool detail to pick out. And something that someone like Sonny would latch onto, right? Would latch onto this idea of this person who looks at this big risk and is pumped for it, right? Who wants it, who wants the risk, who wants to take the chance, who wants to take the shot, who wants it on their back, right? I think that's a cool metaphor. One of the metaphors that works in the movie towards Sonny, much more than like that the gambling thing at the beginning, right?
And you really have to have that because it is, knowing what Michael Jordan became, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we need to be able to see like him at this stage where it's very much embryonic, where only a guy like Sonny can see how great he is and what he is going, the kind of player that he's, and that's what ultimately kind of convinces Jordan's family, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the real sort of struggle in this movie is to get across to them that I see something in him that, you know, they're going to give him lots of money and they're going to put him up on a level with like all these other players. But you want to go with someone who's going to treat him for the superstar, like the beyond, the god of this sport that he actually is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this movie fucking worships Michael Jordan.
I mean, it has to, right?
It is, but wow.
It really does. And the one person we really haven't talked about yet is Affleck himself, right? In this movie as
he's a ton of fun in this. Did you like that performance?
You know I loved it, Nick. You know I loved it. Because I was watching it, I was like, this is what I want. This is what I want from him, right?
Yeah,
which is like, this is where he belongs, right?
It's a long way from Tony Mendez. A very long way from Joe Coughlin.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't need you to be the lead. Like, take a fun supporting part where you can just do what you do best, which is to come into a scene with all of this charisma and all of this weird energy that you have that gets lost when you're trying to be this leading man, this sort of like boring leading man. I know you look like one, but like you don't have the personality of one.
The Phil Knight scenes with Ben Affleck feel like Kevin Smith came, the best version of Kevin Smith came to set those days. And he's like, all right, Kev, direct me. And he just did it. And it's, if that was true, it would be the best thing Kevin Smith has done in decades.
Yeah. And I love this. I think the character has a nice little arc to him, right? Where
he's mercurial. Yeah. We never really know, he's easily influenced and we never really know exactly what he's thinking. And clearly he's this very successful and he has this like set of rules. It's a visual device in the film. I like this, like these guidelines, these standards for this company that are just tacked all over every wall in the corporate headquarters. Yeah. And he really does seem to live by those. And he also has this like bullshit Buddhist thing like every CEO does where, this sort of corporate philosophy that he tries to impart on people. And there's a great moment later on where Chris Tucker's like, fuck is he talking about?
Yeah. Well, I love that scene where Damon's like, no, I just thought you were going to give me some Buddhist proverb I don't want to fucking hear or whatever. And then he says something else to him, whatever. And then when he's leaving, he gives it to him and he goes, there it is.
There it is. Yeah.
And he walks out. When they're taking the piss out of this corporation, this guy, and I think one is over Affleck, just like we were talking about the Argo, he kind of makes Knight a little bit of a buffoon most of the time, right? There's a little bit of buffoonery to him. And that's when I think the movie works, where like this idea of like, okay, this guy isn't like some genius who can do no wrong, who's going to come late into the meeting and just like sell the shit out of it to Jordan's family, right? He comes in and he's like, I was very late because I had a meeting, but I was like, I must come in. They convinced him to come
7 minutes late to make him look more important, but he completely blows it. Like that whole scene is really great too. Bateman's character makes like a dad joke at the beginning of that and nobody laughs. And like his reaction, the fallout of that for him is really great. Yeah. Like, am I wrong in saying this movie is a much, much better comedy than it is anything else it's trying to do?
Absolutely. 100%. Yes. I think when it's cooking really well with
like, I want a 90-minute just kind of like rat-a-tat, Aaron Sorkin sort of comedy, it feels like it's Aaron Sorkin light, I guess, right?
It is.
Like I saw some reviews compare it to The Social Network. Again, another movie about a corporate triumph. That makes you feel a little icky in retrospect, although Fincher is definitely being a little subversive about his
that movie is very subversive. That's the
Zuckerberg and all that, but they do win in the end, right? Facebook does that. They are triumphant at the end of this movie, or that movie. And I think with this one, if it could just do a little more of that and, some of the other swings it takes, except for that scene with Bateman that we were talking about earlier, which, by the way, my notes on this, I took them on my phone. I have a stylus on my phone. That's why I have the phone that I have. And I'm going back through them. And every time I wrote Bateman, it looks like Batman. And it was just a weird, surreal experience reading back through those.
Yeah, Nick's a green bubble, if anybody wants to know out in the world. He's a green bubble on the phone. So I think...
That's so racist.
I know. I'm sorry, but it's true.
Dare you, sir?
It's one of the last forms of acceptable
it is,
stereotyping.
Fucking green bubble.
Yeah, exactly. I think, the bringing up the Sorkin thing is interesting, right? Because again, we talked about this in the show before. I love Sorkin, right? Like most millennials, I love Aaron Sorkin.
I like him.
I've had my time with Aaron Sorkin where I was totally in the bag for him. I'm less so now as I've gotten older and sort of seen the holes, right, in some of the stuff that he's done.
I see through it a little bit.
I more.
Kind of did, yeah.
But when he does have so many phases to his career, right? And has been able to reinvent himself several times, right? Social Network, Moneyball, Steve Jobs is a whole other coordination of scripts and stuff that were kind of Hollywood shaking as well. And I think like the problem again with Sorkin stuff is that when he's talking about stuff that has real stakes, his thing works really well. But when you go to Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, it's like, okay, we're talking about like they're being this serious about like mediocre comedy. Like I don't have the investment, you know? And that's what leaks into this a little bit too, where it's like when you're in it with like the people, when it's just about the people, it works, right? But when you start to go out of it and it's like, if we don't get this, we're not going to sign the shoe deal. And I'm like, that's not a stake that I have any personal connection to. I can't find it in there, right? And they tried to add stuff to where like Sonny's going to lose his job. The Nike basketball division will go away because he goes behind Chris Messina's agent's character's back. Apparently he's the most powerful man in the whole world and goes behind his back to talk to the Jordan family. And he basically says, because you went behind my back, I will make sure that you got a business or whatever, basically is what he says. You know, so, and that brings us to actually, we haven't talked about Viola Davis yet, right? Who plays Mrs. Jordan, right? Obviously she's a fantastic actress, legendary actress at this point.
Also Michael Jordan's choice, by the way.
It was, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, good choice, but
good
yeah,
instinct by Michael.
Yeah. He should direct his own movie.
Yeah, I'm sure he would love to, but I think she's great in it. And I think she gives as much as she can, like you said, to center you with the Jordan family and make them part of the stakes of the movie, right? You do get a sense of like this woman who they live a, you know, they're not poor by any stretch of the imagination, but they live
they're
modest,
middle class, but they're, you know, and they know like whatever happens with Michael Jordan, they like, you can tell with her. And that's why I like this performance. Yeah. There is a sense that like, she knows she's going to be like a queen, right? Like she is going to be a very powerful person in the world because her son is who he is. And she wants to keep him, you know, how do I keep this person humble in any way when people are going to be looking at him the way this movie looks at him? Yeah, I think Viola Davis is really good in this too, although she could probably play this kind of part in her sleep.
Oh, 100%. Yes.
Like, she probably read this script once, is like, oh, yeah, got it, done.
Yeah.
You know, it almost feels a little too easy, but it's a good casting choice.
It's a great casting choice. I mean, you know, they say, I think Milos Forman said like 95% of directing is good casting, right? I think he said something like that, right? So, and that goes here. But I will say like, it's not a showy performance either though. She doesn't have any big, huge scenes like that. Whenever she gets she never really goes above a certain level, even when, you know, her and Damon are sort of disagreeing about that final terms of the deal.
But there's nothing to argue about. She's going to be wealthy. Her family is going to win no matter what. So it's, it would be like histrionics are not what this part needs at all. It's not what this movie needs at all.
And she does a good job bringing it home. Of course, like you said, you just expect it, right? She is just about as steady and a sure thing as you could possibly pick out for a casting in a movie. Great actress, right? So and we've seen her do even, you know, obviously huge roles that are much more complicated than this one. But we're all driving right towards this idea, right? That Nike has this budget. They have $250,000 to split between like 4 players. Sonny's big play is, no, we give it all to one player and we make it all about him. And does sort of come of this idea, which is we will center this entire thing around him. Like the shoe, we're not going to be like, here are our shoes, you will wear them. You know, we are going to make a shoe for you. Like the shoe is going to be about you, which is like one of those things where like, okay, this is a cool idea and concept. If this is really where it came from for the first time, fascinating, right? Because
I agree. And I feel like a lot of that is dramatic license for the movie. Yeah. But it does, you know, Affleck's a good director. And I think he establishes that really nicely. I like Adidas too, right? Like, I guess I'm a little bit of a shoe guy. But there's that shot of like all the Adidas sneakers. They all look exactly the same, except the color on the stripes is different. And that's the point, right? Like every player is wearing these, but like that's the most variation that you get. You know, it is generic in some sense. And we are going to make something that is art, and that is art centered on this one player. It's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I let, you know, again, we get into territory from other movies, other things here, right? Which is like, this is sort of what happens in Jerry Maguire too, where it's sort of like, look, you'll be my only client. So you will be my sole focus. You're going to be another number. Ask this person what they're, you know, when you go to a meeting with this person, there's almost an exact same scene in Jerry Maguire where he's like, you go to a meeting with this person, this is what they're going to say. And that scene is in this movie, right? Where
can I tell you? I wouldn't know because I've never seen that movie.
I know. Brian has told me this.
Okay. So I don't need to bring it up. All right. Yeah.
It's crazy to me. You've never seen it, but that's fine.
But we'll get to it at some point.
Yeah, maybe we will, because maybe we'll do that director. But it's similar scene, right? And similar vibe too, which is like, I'm one man against sort of like this big system. One of whom is Jay Moore, oddly, because Jay Moore has a random like couple scenes in this movie.
What's he doing in this movie? Yeah, he's like an Adidas executive who has like one line of dialogue. And
yeah. That feels like to me he's like their buddy or something, or it is sort of almost like an inside Jerry Maguire reference, because he plays a very similar character in Jerry Maguire.
Oh, maybe, but like his name is in the credits, but he's not really in the movie.
I mean, maybe there's a time where that was a bigger section, right? Because
could be. That's what I felt like. Maybe it was cut out or something.
Yeah. Almost in like a Ford v Ferrari type of way. I would have loved to have seen a little bit more of the competitors and how they were reacting to what was going on. You know what I mean? Like, if that stuff is a little more interesting to me, because like, I don't know what was going on in Nike, Adidas and Converse at the time. You know what I mean?
I do really, really love the bit. Maybe we'll call it my second favorite thing in the movie, where the first time, Vaccaro goes down to North Carolina, meets with the Jordan family, and like he's trying to pitch Michael Jordan's mom, Dolores, on this thing, like, come to Nike. This is how they're going to treat you. And he basically goes through this whole thing about like what she's going to hear in her corporate meetings with the competitors, with Adidas and Converse. And then we get those scenes, and it's exactly that. And it's so obvious and it's so on the nose, but it's so fucking funny. Yeah,
I love scenes like that. Give me those kind of scenes all day long. I have no problem with those scenes.
He really sells it well too.
Yeah, it's a good way to establish.
I can't believe Adidas signed off on this movie.
Yeah.
Or allowed them to use the brand name, because he basically calls them Nazis, and they basically don't do anything to.
Yeah, I wonder who owns Adidas now. It's also maybe a thing. Probably not the same people own it anymore.
Well, I didn't realize that Nike owned Converse.
I didn't know that either. No, until the end of this movie.
That's one of the 1,000 title cards at the end of this movie is Nike purchased Converse 2003. It's like, I was around in 2003. I don't remember that at all.
I didn't know that either. And that's another scene with Chris Messina, right? Where he's like, they're Nazis. And he's like, no, they're not. He's like, they saw whatever with the guy. And that's when he's like winding him up, He gives him, Chris Messina gives him the name of the shoe, which I thought was a good like little comeback, like running joke in the movie. I thought that was cool. And really, there isn't that. This is the thing where we were talking about how the movie kind of loses steam. Once they get Phil on board, that's the big thing. Like, how can we get Phil on board? We've got to spend this weekend in the office. Basically, Phil is like, you didn't have authorization to go to North Carolina. You don't have authorization to make an order. I'm the boss here. You are not allowed to do whatever the fuck you want, basically, right? I'm leaving today. If you don't hear from me on Sunday, the day before Michael Jordan's supposed to come, you don't have an offer to give, and it's over.
It's canceled. The deal's
off. Canceled. The deal's off. And so that's when him and Bateman stay over for the weekend. That's when we get the speech about the kid. And this is when we meet, obviously our friend with the shoes. And we have those conversations as well. And basically then Phil comes back and he's like, all right, we're going to do it. Like, let's do it or whatever. And they've had their little planning meeting, which we're about an hour into the movie now. And at that point, the movie has drive. The movie has a forward momentum. We're leading up to the meeting. In the next 20 minutes, we've got the momentum. We're going to have the meeting. The meeting, like we talked about, the meeting scene is fun, right? It's like we set this whole plan. The plan just goes crazy wrong in every single direction, right?
They start showing this video because Phil Knight's thing is like, we got to make a video. And this video is like terrible. It's just like looks like, somebody's high school highlight reel or something like that. And, totally doesn't work on the Jordans. And so Matt Damon has to bring together all his fortitude and courage and deliver a monologue that's going to sell them on this. That's the climax of the movie, right?
Yeah.
It should be.
Great monologue.
Yeah.
Great performance of a monologue. Like, Damon nails it. And when this is the time where using what you know about Michael Jordan really works, right? This idea of pitching this idea like, look, you're great. You're great. And look, you're going to have all of these things, right? You're going to get this, you're going to get that, you're going to get this. We're going to build you up to something that doesn't exist. And then we're going to try to tear you down because you're not hitting this fake thing that we created for
that person every day of your life.
Yeah. And I love that. And he basically says like, and you're strong enough to do it. And I love how he ends it with like, you don't need us. We need you, basically. Right. And it's a great way to sell it to him.
Yeah.
All that really works. This idea of, look, I will not get emotional or into like how profitable it would be for the corporation, but Will I get emotional about sports and what they mean? Absolutely, I will. So like really good idea to play it into that, right? To really push it home in that, this idea of like a shoe is just a shoe until someone steps into it. Like great line. I love the reaction by Bateman because he kind of said that line, earlier. I like that interplay. Right. And I like how they react to the speech. Like, what the fuck did that come from? That was great, man. But I thought that scene worked really well. And then there's all of this sort of fake, drama about whether or not he's going to sign.
Won't they stuff? Yeah. And, someone else is putting up the $250,000 and we can't match it. And, that sad call from Chris Tucker. Yeah. I mean, the next half hour, like there is a next half hour of the movie, as you're saying. And why is there? And then, I mean, that's bad enough. And then, like I said, those title cards that just I mean, we care about these characters. It does a good job of making us care about these characters. Guys, we don't care that much.
No, I don't need I don't need to know that Nike bought Converse. This wasn't a movie about.
No.
The founding of Nike. That's the other thing too. It's like, this isn't, would it be a cool story to see how Phil Knight founded Nike and what the story, maybe. Because then you get maybe a little bit of that underdog feeling.
Right, because that's another thread that's kind of not really followed here. But like they keep saying, oh, it's just like the old days, just like the early days at Nike. And it's like, man, I kind of want to see that a little bit. I want to see that movie. I want to see the prequel to Air.
Yeah, prequel.
You write the script. We'll get that on the blacklist and we'll get that thing made.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of fluff at the end, a lot of, like you're saying, manufactured stuff. We get this idea, right, of the other part of it too that is unsatisfying is that there's nothing that our character does to get to the end where she calls and goes, okay, we want to do it. Right.
No, it's hurry up and wait.
Yeah. It's just like
he's basically sitting there and awaiting a phone call that he's maybe going to get, that we know he's going to get.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. It's a foregone conclusion too. So
exactly. And we could have done what the deal was in a title card, right? Yeah. We could have gone like they walk out and they're like, man, great job. And then we get that wide shot of the Nike office and we get the letters above. Michael Jordan signed the deal. He got a percentage of the profits. It made this much money. You know what I mean? Like, because there's this, they try to build up the idea that like, okay, he wants part of the profits. So is Phil going to go for this? Because Phil has been very much like, there's a board and my ass is on the line. I don't want to risk anything.
We already had that story with Phil. Yeah. That conflict is done and resolved. Done. And maybe in real life it happened this way where it's like, now we got to sell him on this thing. But like by this point in the movie, we definitely, I agree. We don't need that at all. And it's not that interesting. And honestly, I think it goes a little bit against some of the stuff they're trying to set up between Vaccaro and Jordan also. Like it is, that's a money thing, right? Like, and I guess they sort of sell it at the end of the movie. Like, this sort of blew up sports marketing, the way players got paid and one of the many title cards. I'll tell you this, I remember a lot of the information from the pages and pages of text we got at the end of this movie, but I guess he was one of the people that advocated for college players getting compensated for their likeness and stuff like that. So great, but maybe that's another movie and certainly not as interesting of a movie. So maybe get this one over in 89 minutes.
Yeah, but I'll say this, but I do think the movie about him trying to get college players compensated for being exploited, I think is way more the type of movie you're talking about, which is like the Tucker, that,
okay. Yeah,
that's a movie about
Sonny Vaccaro versus the system.
Yeah, somebody actually trying to do something good for the people who don't have, right? That I think is a much more interesting story as far as just propelling a movie traditionally, through or whatever. Again, end this movie after the meeting, give us some title cards, we're out. And I think I would have been like, awesome. What a tight, entertaining movie from start to finish. Yeah, it's got this like corporate stuff in it, but like you're going to get a lot out of it anyway. Just watch it. Like you'll have a lot of fun with it, right? Instead of to be like, the first 2/3 is I think really good. And then the last third is a little bit weak. It has a little bit of, fat on it, which is unfortunate. I will say that there is this, again, one of these things where I feel like they're trying to seed something throughout the movie and they're not really committing to it, which is this idea at the very beginning, Phil asks Sonny, do you run? Right. And he explains what it's like to run, right? How hard it is, right? And what kind of, it gives you clarity, all this kind of stuff.
Later on, how'd you make this decision? I went for
a run. Good line. Yep. They bring it back at the very end again, where Damon's character actually goes on a run and he runs for like 3 seconds and he goes, no, this is terrible. And I was like, I feel you.
You liked that scene? I thought that was like a Family Guy cutaway.
Yeah. But again, I think it's trying to show you at the end, like, okay, he's taking a new step in his life, right? He's going to whatever. But we haven't
attempting to, sure.
But we have not really set up that he needs to throughout the movie, right? Because all you've been telling us is yeah, he has trouble in the corporate world, but he's right.
Right. He can still do his job good if he's fat.
Yeah, exactly. Also, he's right. So does he need to change how he is? Yeah. Not according to your movie, because according to your movie, he's the right when everyone else is wrong. So what is the point you're trying to get across to us with those kind of these kind of movie things? The other thing it does too, which I just have to mention, this is a filmmaking thing, which I hate in modern movies. There's a scene where, you know, basically they're pitching, Phil has agreed to the percentage part, and he's like taking a nap or whatever, meditating, a forgiveness meditation, or the fuck he says he's doing. And, you know, he's talking about how much money could it possibly make or whatever. But it's shot in his office and the lights are off in his office, right? And shot in this modern way they shoot dark scenes, which is there's no lights. It's really flat and dark. And it just, I hate the way they shoot modern dark scenes, because you're able to shoot them with digital cameras and get more exposure. You don't have to light them like you do with film. And I just think it stylistically looks like crap. You know, for a movie that looks good the rest of the time, I think it's a good looking movie.
Yeah.
Good looking movie. This isn't a, you know, Robert Richardson is a great cinematographer. I think we talked, didn't he do Live by Night as well?
He did. Yeah.
Right. Great cinematographer. This is just a modern filmmaking, digital filmmaking thing that I do not like. I hate how they film these scenes. Use some lights, make it look a little artistic. It doesn't have to actually be dark.
And actually the corporate office, the set, the Nike headquarters, it was really cool looking.
Yeah.
You know, it has this very 80s, this color block sort of thing going on the walls and everything. Like even the bathroom in that scene earlier, from after the meeting. Like it's really interesting looking and interestingly shot. Yeah, I agree with you though. It's like that scene doesn't need to look like that anyway, right?
No.
I'm not sure. Yeah, this is not a corporate noir thing.
No,
it's a comedy. Like, it's lighthearted. Maybe it needs to be like just the slightest bit more lighthearted.
Yeah,
it takes itself a little serious, and that right, like that looks like a scene. You know, that reminds me of like a Spotlight kind of scene. And this is that's about some serious shit. This movie's not really.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree on that.
I almost feel like he shot Spotlight. I'm sure I'm wrong about that.
Oh, you want to look it up? I mean, I'll look it up. Robert Richardson, I don't know if he shot Spotlight or not. But yeah, so I mean, that's really one of my only really like quibbles with the way the movie looks. I love that they have this kind of big set, you know, where they have a lot of people on set a lot. You're able to walk through the space quite a bit, which I think is nice. Much like Live by Night, though, there is a lot of walking from a place, just going into a room and talking to another person across a desk. It's like Affleck's move, I guess, is just let's have somebody walk into a room and talk to somebody across a desk and then walk into another room.
We know who those people are in this movie. We know what the stakes are. Like it's done so much better here than it is in Live by Night, as you could say about a lot of things in this movie. Robert Richardson did not shoot Spotlight.
Okay. Who did shoot Spotlight?
Well, now you're going to make me pronounce this guy's name. Masunobu Takayanagi.
Oh, okay. All right. I want to mention a couple of things I love. One of the Messina screaming scenes where I love all the
Messina screaming scenes.
He says, "I will eat your fucking nuts." Which I just made me laugh. It made me laugh quite a bit.
I love the bit. It's just before that where he says that, like, he's screaming at him. He says something about herpes simplex 2.
Yeah.
And Vaccaro says, well, if you know that there's 2 variations of that means you probably have it.
Yeah. And he goes, "Of course I have it. Everybody has herpes."
The only reason you don't is because nobody wants to fuck you.
Yeah.
Vaccaro goes, "I don't see it that way."
Yeah. Or he says, "I never thought of it like that." Or
no, he says, "I don't see it that way."
Right.
I love it. This is a very good script.
Yeah, it's a very, very good script. Yes.
Again, there is a very good 89-minute movie in this somewhere.
Agreed wholeheartedly on that one. But yeah, there's not much more to talk about the movie. That's the thing too. The movie we covered kind of everything, I think, pretty much. I think it's a nice rebound, right? Obviously from where we were. I don't think it's quite as good as the 3 best one, you know, the 3 best ones before it. I think The Town.
No, but it's a step in the right direction for
Completely.
Sure. After a disaster, I will go ahead and use the D word for Live by Night. And this makes me, you know, like, again, Affleck's star was really rising for me, and then it took a dive, and I'm very interested to see what he does next. I cannot wait to see the next phase of the Ben Affleck directorial career.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you on that one. Let's hope that there is, you know, more movies to come where he gets the chance to get some budgets and do stuff and make some movies, because...
Well, we know what it has to be now, right? Like, it's either a crime drama set in Boston or some kind of period piece with a lot of people talking in offices in the late 70s or early 80s.
Yes.
And you know what? That's not a bad niche. I like both of those kinds of movies. I like both of those kinds of settings. So, you know, I'm on board. for whatever it is.
It seems like he's got another movie in pre-production called Animals. That's supposed to star Matt Damon, but we'll see what it ends up being.
I just like what I don't want from Ben Affleck at this point in his career is like, you know, sometimes someone at this stage will do like, oh, I'm gonna make a kids movie, or like I've always wanted to make like this kind of comedy that I have no experience in whatsoever. And it's just, it flops hard. Like it's just tone deaf and they don't really get it. Or like a horror movie or something. Like I think, you know, Ben Affleck maybe has a narrower skill set than the other filmmakers we've talked about in the show, but he also executes it really well. And I will say, of the few filmographies now, this is our third, and we're five. They've all been 5 films. This is my favorite thus far. I didn't think it was gonna be.
That's an interesting question, Nick. An interesting point. You know, I think overall, just like as an overall group of movies, I think yes, I probably liked. I mean, Live by Night's obviously a disaster, but the other movies I liked a lot, and they were all very consistently entertaining, and quality. I think I enjoyed.
I don't know if he's the best filmmaker.
No. You're talking about the movies in general.
I'm just talking about the movies and my enjoyment of them and my appreciation of what they were trying to do and what they were able to achieve. You know, he's not taking swings quite as wild as like Karen Kusama.
No.
But you know, she will like you know, imaginary career 20 years down the road. Karen Kusama is gonna make like an Oscar quality movie that's not sort of a, you know, Argo. Yeah. Whereas Ben Affleck, maybe if he's lucky, he can make another Argo, but he's not going to make like the next step up from there.
No. I was going to say, I think the highs of the Kusama filmography were higher for me. Like the peaks of it were higher, but I think there were some dips in there that were tough, and not all her fault, but just like, you know, her career has been rougher than his career has been. Sure. But I think like, yes, I think overall as a group of movies, I was like I said, I was an average out the star ratings. Probably. I think you'd probably be like, yes, I enjoyed this one the most out of all of them. For sure.
Oh, we gotta rank these, don't we?
That's what I'm saying. That's the next step.
We've come to the end of a filmography here.
We come to the end of the filmography. We originally, we've been tossing around the idea of doing some bonuses for this, like a Good Will Hunting and a Last Duel. My question to you is, do we want to hold off? Because there's a possibility we do Gus Van Sant one day. Right. You know, it's not out of the realm of possibility. And we talked about doing Ridley Scott and maybe sections, like doing like 80s Ridley Scott or 90s Ridley Scott. And so that this might come up as well. So there are 2 directors we might do one day. Let's hold off on doing those as bonuses. If they were like random filmmakers that they were written from,
why would you just not want to watch Good Will Hunting? Or you just?
I love Go Hunting. No. I love Go Hunting.
Yeah, I was kind of looking forward to it.
I love Go Hunting,
but I could always just watch Good Will Hunting.
Exactly. But. So we're going to announce our next filmmaker after we rank these things. Nick doesn't even know. I don't even know yet. There's 2 in my head. I want to pick one of them. I'm just
leaving it to you. So it's going to be a big surprise for everybody. And I can't wait. But let's do the Affleck ranking first.
Yeah. So
number 5 is Live by Night for both of us. So let's just get that out of the way. That's the Eon Flux of his career.
Yeah, that's definitely the Eon Flux of his career. That's what's the Joseph Kosinski? Oblivion?
Yeah.
We talked about this last time, right? Which movie I don't know, movie was more boring for me, Oblivion or Live by Night, but there was a close for the 2 of them, I would say.
I'd go with Live by Night.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Maybe because I wanted more out of it. You know,
at least Oblivion looks cool.
Yeah, and well, there's parts of Live by Night that look cool.
It's true. No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. All right, so Live by Night, yes, we're agreed on Live by Night being the worst.
These are going to be like our closest. They've all been pretty close. We've been we haven't deviated much. So so we've got what's remaining. We've got Air, Argo, The Town, and Gone Baby Gone. Yeah, I'm going to go Air for number 4.
Okay. Yeah, it's between Air and Argo for me. They're very close for me. But yeah, I think I would put Air next as well, and then go Argo at the 3 spot for me.
Okay. I think I'm going to go The Town for 3.
Okay. So what's your number 2 then?
So number 2 would be Argo. And I mean, my number 1, we've known it since we started this series all those weeks ago. So yeah.
The reason we did the
Well, no, the reason we did this is that I really wanted to see Live by Night.
That's right. So we're pretty close. You know, it's Live by Night, Air, Argo, Gone Baby Gone, and The Town would be my number 1.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I just enjoy The Town. I guess The Town feels like, to me, the sort of platonic ideal of what Ben Affleck is trying to do with his movies. You know, I think Gone Baby Gone is a little bit of an outlier. Obviously, it's very Boston, you know, but the smallness of it, right, and sort of the understatedness of it in a lot of ways, I think stands in contrast to the other movies he's done. And I think, look, I give The Town and Gone Baby Gone the same like rating, right? So I'm going like, it's really vibes that I'm going off when I pick which one I like better. I like The Town a little better because I like the action. I like sort of that more sweeping sort of crime epicness to it. And then Gone Baby Gone, very, very close second. You know, it's one of the things where it could be, you could ask me in a week and I'd say, no, I think Gone Baby Gone is my favorite. You know, so it's that close to the two of them for me. Yeah.
Fair enough.
All right.
Interestingly, the one I like the most is the one that does not have Ben Affleck in it.
This is true. It's true.
For what it's worth.
For what it's worth. There you go. Casey Affleck is great in the movie. It's definitely, well, that's not true. I shouldn't say definitely. It's close between Casey Affleck and Matt Damon. I think the best lead in any of his movies. You know, obviously doing very different things and with very different stakes and vibes.
Hard to compare, for sure.
Yes, absolutely. So our next filmmaker, Nick. This is a good question. I think.
Do you want me to vamp here? What's happening?
No, I'm not going to edit. I'll edit, obviously.
I could. What do you want me to riff on?
Yeah, just start riffing. Just start talking about things.
No, you should probably just name a film.
You've really brought. I'm just trying to see
deal with airline food.
So I think we're gonna do Joe Wright. That's what we're gonna do for our next director. I think Phil's in this really interesting place in filmmaking, which is, you know, a journeyman, but in a very sort of almost a tourist way, right? Because
this is a guy that gets nominated for Oscars.
Exactly. But is not a guy when you like list the big filmmakers.
Like whose favorite filmmaker is him.
Exactly. This is my whole thing. He's sort of like
he makes good movies, but like, you know, people, because you mentioned him and people are like, oh yeah, I love Shaun of the Dead. Nope, wait, that's Edgar Wright.
Yeah. All of the time I feel like it's Joe Wright. It's like, wait, who's Joe Wright? And you name a couple of his movies. And you're like, oh, I really like some of those movies. You know?
But not as much as I like Baby Driver and Hot Fuzz and
He's sort of, I have this joke that the Foo Fighters are a great band, a legendary band at this point, but they're nobody's favorite band of all time, right?
Yeah, right.
It's just I'm sure I'm making a blanket statement. I'm sure there's somebody like, they're my favorite, but just another thing. That's what they are, right? They're a great band. Can't deny it. I love some of their albums. Legendary band, nobody's favorite band. That's how I feel about Joe Wright, right? Which is, I think he's a great director. I think he's made some really phenomenal movies. And nobody is like, oh, my favorite director is Joe Wright. Like I follow him to the ends of the earth, you know, I'll go to all his shows or whatever, you know, so I really.
But he's also the kind of director where when you hear he is attached to something or you like see his name on a poster, do people still see director's name? I used to, you walk by when you're at the theater and you see a director's name on a poster. Oh, right. So this has, this is going to be quality of some kind. Like it is.
Oh yeah.
It's a steal of quality in some sense. And I think that's a good choice. Interesting pick for this show.
And one of those directors who it's fun to do these kind of directors, right? Ben Affleck is sort of like this. Obviously, he comes into it with another reason for being immediately notable and making a notable movie. But like Kaczynski making Tron Legacy.
I know nothing about Joe Wright.
So Joe Wright, his first movie is the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, right? A movie that's stuck around, right? Like a movie that people still talk about. Great cast, a lot of predicting people who would be big later. One of those type of movies, right? That sort of, you've got your Keira Knightleys, you've got your Matthew McFadden's, you've got, what the fuck is her name? You've got, Rosamund Pike's in it, one of those kind of movies. Follows it up with Atonement, right? Keira Knightley again.
Atonement.
Going to be a fun movie to talk about.
Yeah. Hannah was one of his?
Well, I'm going through it. The Soloist is his next movie. We take a little dippy dip, but gonna be a fun movie.
The Soloist.
Robert Downey Jr. and Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx is like a violinist who lives on the streets.
I've always wanted to not see that movie. Okay.
Yeah, well, now you're gonna have to see it, even if you don't want to.
Great. You know what? I might have actually seen it at some point, but I don't remember anything about it if I did.
Yes. Then Hannah, which is a banger. Hannah's a banger.
Interesting. Yeah.
A great Saoirse Ronan performance, right? She's also in Atonement. Obviously, that's her big like starting point. Anna Karenina, His Anna Karenina came in 2012, which I've never seen, which I kind of always wanted to see. Then we've got Pan, his Peter Pan with Hugh Jackman, and
I forgot about that.
And guess who we get to talk about again, Nick? Old Garrett Hedlund makes his second appearance.
Great.
Intrepid Filmographers.
Who does he play in Pan? Is he Captain Hook?
Yes, he plays James Hook.
James Hook,
yes. James Hook. He's credited as James
that movie
Hook.
Already.
We'll see.
You're not really selling this one as good as I thought you were going to.
This is the next movie, the Gary Oldman Academy Award performance.
Churchill movie?
The Churchill movie, yep.
Okay.
And then the Peter Dinklage Cyrano movie that came out in 2021, which I feel like kind of got lost in the COVID shuffle, right?
You're making that up.
I promise I'm not making it up. And then the thriller The Woman in the Window with Amy Adams, which came out in 2021 as well. So a couple COVID movies that got lost in the shuffle. So that's his filmography. So interesting filmography. Some I think bangers, some movies where maybe we're not going to be super psyched about, and maybe some ones that we haven't seen that end up being great ones. Like I think I've heard really good things about Anna Karenina. So I'm really excited to see that. Okay, not a huge filmography. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 movies.
That's
so
more than we've covered.
More than we've done, but we're graduating up.
The Peter Dinklage Cyrano movie that I don't actually believe exists. I'm sure it does, but I'm pleading ignorance. What if that turns out to be the one?
I mean, who knows?
The undiscovered classic of the last decade.
We'll see. But one of those guys where I think I've always been fascinated by what we're talking about here, which is like this sort of, I don't know, let's call it like the Stephen Daldry-esque career, which is like, nobody who's not a super film nerd knows who you are, but you get nominated for Oscars. Yeah. And when there's like a Tony period piece they need done.
Yeah. There's a novel that needs adaptation and they need a guy who's been to the Oscars a few times, looks good in a tuxedo for sure.
Yeah. Joe Wright's on that list. You know what I mean? So we're gonna speak about him, and then on we'll sure to be running now, I think, or maybe it's already over. I'll cut this around it. I'll make sure I say it the right way. We're gonna do, if the timing works out after Joe Wright, we will do the winner of our bracket, which is this competition we're doing with directors who are not journeymen or under discussed. In fact, some of them are over discussed. Some of them most of them are auteurs, right? People who have really legendary filmographies or legendary filmmakers.
And we'll over discuss them a little more.
We will. We'll try to do one of those a year and let the listeners vote on that. So hopefully you got your votes in, and we'll kind of do whoever the winner of that is. If the timing works out, if it's one of those things where we kind of, because we're recording in advance, people don't know how the sausage is made, or we're getting near the end of this filmography and we don't know who the winner is yet, let's say. Like we may have to do another shorty in between or something like that, but we'll see how it works out. I think in the coming weeks, we'll know that schedule much better. Obviously Joe Wright is up next, and then we will hopefully do our winner, and then we'll see who else we've got on the docket. We've got some ideas, some much bigger filmographies than 8 movies that are, lurking in the shadows for us we're going to have to address at some point. We're working our way up though, but I've had a lot of fun with these 3 filmmakers. I think it's been a good time. I'm learning stuff about them that I didn't really expect to learn, even with the mission of the show being to learn certain things about this. I didn't expect to pick out these stylistic things that Affleck does every time. If you had asked me, does Ben Affleck have a recognizable thing he does every time? I've been like, Boston? Other than Boston, I don't really have a thing that he does.
Ben Affleck is in some sense an auteur. And there is definitely some, then I think you could do that with almost anyone's filmography, but I'm glad that we are talking about these people that we're talking about. I think it's important.
Absolutely.
Not everyone can be Stanley Kubrick, Martin Scorsese, etc.
No, they can't. And sometimes, Joe Wright's been working for 20 years. It's like, and I'm sure people have talked about his movies when they review them when they come out on a podcast, right? But I don't know how many people have dove into his filmography, really, really tried to parse out what makes him tick, what kind of filmmaker he is, and we're going to try to do that, just like we've done with the other 3.
And he feels like that kind of, there's nothing problematic about Joe Wright, right? Like he's not going to make a movie that's going to really offend people. I don't know anything about his personal life, but I assume he's probably a decent guy.
I don't know. I don't want to make that declaration.
Well, we would have heard, right?
Have we Googled his name? Joe, my favorite thing to do when I'm going to talk about somebody is I go name plus controversy and see what comes up.
It's probably like there was a 127-minute cut of his movie, and he's like, no, I'm arguing for the 134-minute cut of it, damn it.
I got nothing, man. We got nothing. Got nothing. There's a Joe Wright in the Kentucky legislature that apparently had some problems, but none of this Joe Wright filmmaker stuff.
No, he seems like a genteel British. Is he British? I think so.
What kind of question is that?
I thought you were like, nah, he's from Nebraska.
Did you hear the movies I read out that he has done? No American makes that set of movies. You know, I one of the movies I'm very excited. I've never seen The Darkest Hour. It's one of those movies I purposely avoided because I'm like, I don't want to just see some biopic about this guy. But what I've heard is actually it's pretty good. Like it's got
Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
And I like Joe Wright, although I'm sure I'm going to like him less after I see Pan.
But as we've seen, right, talking about fascinating failures can be its own kind of instructive document, right, for what we're doing, right?
Well, and also just a director. I mean, that is a story that everyone is very familiar with. There's been like a billion versions of, like, there's been 10 of them since Pan came out.
Probably.
David Lowery did one not too long ago.
Who was the other director we were talking about doing, which is so funny?
Which I'm very excited to talk about him someday.
We'll absolutely do him. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Story.
Yeah. I haven't seen The Green Knight, and it's a movie
Me either.
And I really want to see it.
Because the movie he made before that is like an all-time classic.
Yeah. But also made a Peter Pan movie. So it's just a weird thing, right?
Maybe that's just a thing. It's a thing you have to do at some point. Spielberg did it.
Remember that Peter Pan movie that came out in the early 2000s? I'm trying to remember. I think Jason Isaacs was Captain Hook in it.
I vaguely remember Jason Isaacs as Captain Hook. I
don't remember what it was called.
Me either.
I gotta look.
Peter Pan.
Probably. Jason Isaacs, Peter Pan. It was called Peter Pan.
Well, I remember at that time, yeah, you could call it Peter Pan.
P.J. Hogan was the director of that film.
I believe the Lowery one is called
Wendy and Peter. I believe
Wendy and Peter. I was going to say Peter and Wendy, but that was
or maybe
was
Peter, maybe Peter and Wendy. I'm not sure.
It might have been Wendy and Peter. I think there was like a feminist thing going on in it or something.
Oh right, P.J. Hogan. Again, maybe somebody we should do sometime, but at the end of his filmography, it's so bad.
Who's PJ Hogan?
He directed Muriel's Wedding and My Best Friend's Wedding. Like, just an interesting, like, that era of filmmaker. Like, he was like a, sort of like Australian, like, indie film director who came over.
Comes to the studio and makes some kind of prestige studio comedies. And
Muriel's Wedding is famous because it brought Toni Collette.
Yeah,
basically to America, right? But the end of his filmography is terrible. So we would never. I don't think we'd ever do it. It's like the reason why we'll never do like Rob Reiner, because it's like at a certain point he had that run where it was like, I only make fantastic movies, and at a certain point he was like, I only make the worst shit you could possibly imagine. He's like, we are only gonna do up until The Family Stone or whatever the fuck. It was like the Rob Reiner movie that where he fell off the tracks. But yeah, like interesting, like why would he do Pan, right? Joe Wright, why did he do Pan? What was his take on it? What was he trying to bring to it, if anything?
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? Like there are these kind of, iconic classic stories, and like any director that is going to impose some kind of, like, you can't just make a straightforward Peter Pan movie, because Disney kind of cornered the market on that like decades ago. So
yeah,
you got to do something. And I think that's where things have struggled. Like, I don't like Spielberg's Hook, but like Hook was a take, right? Like Hook was a fresh approach to Peter Pan that our friend Brian seems to think worked really well, and I was never really a huge fan of. But that's a Spielbergian Peter Pan story. So
when I was a kid, I loved Hook. As an adult, I don't really love it, anymore. It's obviously a failure.
As a kid,
but I loved it as a kid. I loved it as a kid for whatever reason. I don't know what it was. I just really, really loved it. But the Pan, really quick before we get out of here, the Pan thing, the reason I remember that Pan movie is because the trailer had Clocks in it, the Coldplay song Clocks. And it was like one of the first times that song was like out there. Like it was like right around the time they actually released it. So it was like a big deal. And the trailer was actually like pretty cool. Like it was a pretty well done trailer. And then I remember the movie being just nothing, but
it's a good song.
Great song. Back when they were good.
Coldplay is another one of those. If it was a film career, it would be a lot like, what's it, P.J. Hogan?
Yeah, P.J. Hogan or Rob Reiner for sure. Where at one point they're like, not only is this not great, you're going to hate it. And the more you like the stuff before, the more you're going to hate the new stuff. That's really what it was. I was arguing with somebody about Coldplay the other day because they were like, oh, Coldplay. And I was like, listen, man, I know. Because for 15 years, they've been shit. There was more.
Like they were trying so hard to be U2, and then they became U2 in all the worst ways because U2 did the same thing. Like
exactly.
Go back to those early albums; they're phenomenal, but like you can't even listen to them now because like the weight of everything that came after is just dragging them down. And
that's exactly what I said when I was having this conversation with this person. I said, just like U2, man, like you can't, like the new stuff I know makes you forget, but like you go back to the old stuff,
Joshua Tree, like you're never going to hear a better album in your life.
Like try to picture hearing Where the Streets Have No Name for the first time, like it's like,
and then put that up against, I don't even know.
I don't even know what they do now. Like the stuff that we think of as new, as U2
that was like 2001.
It's like 20 years old.
That album that was on all the iPods or
they forced us to
iPhones.
Have.
Yeah.
They forced us to have it. You have U2 and you can't do anything about it. Coldplay, I said, by Parachutes, Rush of Blood to the Head, to some extent X and Y. I think X and Y is very good. Like I don't think it's their best. And I love
Viva La Vida.
Death on All His Friends.
I disliked X and Y a lot, but I thought Viva La Vida was a great comeback. And
that was the last time.
There's some good songs after that, but not good albums after that.
Well, they started this thing with what our friend Brian and I always talk about, where Chris Martin's a gifted songwriter, right? He knows how to write songs, and he can just sit down at the piano and go, song, and this is a hit. It'll be a hit. He just knows the right combination of chords and progressions and everything just to make a hit. He just knows how to do it. And I think a little bit, they got a little bit into that mode with their singles, Well,
it's also, you get so big to a point that it's like, we can't just do a song. We have to do a song and it has to have like Beyonce on it or something.
We need the Chainsmokers.
The Chainsmokers too. But like, you get someone who's bigger than you, which you're as almost, you're a 9.5, they're a 10. You get them on the album and then everything else just kind of pales in comparison. Cause like, we need like Rihanna on this song too. Cause we had her on the last one, what I mean?
You don't need Rihanna. I mean, I like Rihanna. This is me digging at Rihanna, but you don't need Rihanna on a Coldplay album.
I'm not wrong.
Milo's Light Low or whatever had a Rihanna song on it.
And there is a Beyonce song on one of the other albums.
I think so.
And there's definitely a Chainsmokers song.
Yes, definitely a Chainsmokers. Definitely a 21 Pilots collab.
Oh, I don't know that one.
At some
that's
point.
Dog shit.
Yeah, they're bad. They're bad. And he did put out that one album, that like Ghost Stories album,
I like that album a lot.
Right after him and Gwyneth broke up, which I like. It's the thing I like the most, but it lacks. It goes too far the other way, where he's just like, we're gonna strip it all away, and I'm like, no, but you got.
Well, yeah, and then it ends with The Sky Full of Stars, which is like should have been one of the. I will tell you, the greatest moment in Sing 2 is when that song is incorporated in Sing 2.
Speaking like a man who has a small child.
God, yeah. I will. Sing 2 is better than Sing 1. For the record, I'll. That's a hot take, probably, but it is.
I've avoided seeing the Sing movies. They weren't in rotation for.
They are not terrible.
I know they're not terrible.
Good, but they're not terrible.
Yeah, that's all I'm looking for. We give me some not terrible stuff, and then once in a while we watch something great, and then I'm very happy.
Saw the Benedict Cumberbatch Grinch earlier tonight, and it's not terrible.
It's fine. It's fine. It's one of those things where compared to like the Jim Carrey version,
I love about the original TV film, but it's better than the Jim Carrey version.
Exactly. I'd rather that be the thing direction. That you watch 550 times than the Jim Carrey one.
Oh, that's a train wreck.
We did watch, he does love the Charlie Brown special. So we did watch the Charlie Brown Christmas special the other day. I love the Charlie Brown Christmas special. Still.
I do too. I'm finding them a little bit talky and cerebral for my 4-year-old, but I think she'll grow into those. Yeah.
4 is a little young.
We did Thanksgiving, and like I would like to show her the Christmas one because, it makes me fucking cry every time, but I don't know. It's
it was like, I think last year. So when he was 6, he got into it.
So I've done it long.
And the thing I didn't realize about those things when I was younger, right, is the kids are really mean to each other.
Yeah.
But in the way that kids actually are mean to each other, so he gets a fucking kick out of it. Like nobody's business. Like when he calls like Charlie Brown a stupid head or whatever, he thinks it's hilarious,
Because you don't get that anymore.
Yeah, no.
We're so soft now that you can't have those kinds and that is how kids actually talk to each other.
Yeah, he loves it. He loves like when someone's mean, he's like, "Oh, that's like my cousin." He's like, he's got like that thing in him, which I think is great, And we've been working on like, we watch something and then we'll talk about like the comprehension aspect of it. Like, what does it mean? Like, I know they said this, but what are they actually talking about? And he's getting better and better at that part too, which is, it's helped by the fact that in school, that's what they're learning. They're really focusing on that with, reading comprehension. So I'm trying to like bring it into the house too when we watch movies and stuff like that. So he gets that stuff. But
looking forward to that. Although I'm enjoying where we're at now too.
Yeah, I don't enjoy every step of it. It's all, you know, you got to take everything as it comes, you know. But it, you know, when we watched Inside Out for the first time, I kind of had to explain to him like the idea of like things that are happy can also be sad, and things that are sad can also be happy. It's not as these sometimes, you know, when you have these feelings and you're wondering why you feel a certain way, this is why. And like that really was a big turning point for him as far as like understanding that movies and stuff are saying something else sometimes than just like the funny stuff that happens when people fall down or whatever, you know.
Good movie.
It's
really good movie.
Such a good movie. It's such a good movie. We were both crying at the end of it.
Yeah. Fucking bing bong.
Yeah. He goes, Daddy, are you crying too? I said, yes, buddy, I was crying too. Also, it's totally different now because now that I have a kid, there's all that stuff about like, you're thinking about like, oh man, he's gonna have to deal with these feelings soon. Yeah, you know, we're going to get way more complicated.
Like, yep,
yeah,
sure.
Absolutely. So, you know, it's fun to watch movies with him. He's really kind of getting more into it now. You know, he requests movies sometimes now, which is cool. And he wants to see new stuff and he likes going to the movies, so it's good. It's a good movie time with him. You know, I've already told him like, I was like, in a year, we're going to watch this. In another year, we're going to watch this. I was like, when you're 10, we're going to watch Lord of the Rings. You know,
I've been doing a lot of that too, but it's like a 5-year plan, not a 1-year plan.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, all right. So that's going to do it. I can't tell we're recording this right before the holidays. We're about to go on we'll have a little break ourselves, about 2 weeks off before we resume. So it's actually a little timing for us because get 2 weeks off and we start a new director up in 2 weeks with Joe Wright. For you, it'll be the next episode. You'll hear our first take on Pride and Prejudice. The 2005 Pride and Prejudice.
40 some odd guys watching Pride and Prejudice.
American
40 something American guys watching Pride and Prejudice. Stay tuned, everybody.
I'm going to talk a lot about Matthew McFadden in Succession, so we'll get that part of it.
Succession, so I'm not going to talk about that at all.
All right, but some cool movie stars and stuff to talk about. Like here,
I'm going to talk a lot about Jane Austen.
Yeah, I mean that'd be great. You're like, well, in the book, it's not like this.
Yeah, I can't do that with Pride and Prejudice. I did read it a long time ago.
But anyway, until then,
Dennis Lane and Jane Austen are my two favorites.
They're your two. They're really the people you stand for, both of them. So until next time, thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Bobby.
And thank you to everybody who's watching or listening. Be good to one another.